This is a preview of the 5K course at the Parkway West Dale Shepard Invitational at Living Word UMC in Wildwood, Missouri. So we'll start with an overview of the course as a whole, and then we'll focus on 1 kilometer at a time. So there's the start. It does 2 loops of this field, a little maneuver I like to call the particle accelerator, and then we fly off into the woods. There's the 1K mark. And by the parking lot, we'll hit 2K around the back of the church, back past the start and into the woods where we hit the 3K. You can see we're doing a second loop of that outside part. 4K right there. And now we're coming around on our last 1,000. Past the starting line and straight into the finish right there. One thing that makes this course a little unique, the starting line, just because of space considerations, there's 2 starting lines that are offset from each other. And what happens after you start, one group will go down the right side of those trees and the other goes down to the left side of those trees. So it kind of looks like the top group there has a little bit of a head start, but when you wrap around the trees on the end, the group on the right gets that distance back, and so everything's lined up again. So it's a little bit different at the start, so just something to be aware of. It doesn't affect the distances at all. So now, take a look at this race kilometer by kilometer. So there's the starting line again. The first K, if we ignore that offset start, wraps around those trees. You're going to make 1 lap around this field, and then back down that straightaway, and a second lap around that field, half a lap around that field, and then you hit the 1K mark not long after you go into these woods for the first time. Then you're going to follow the trails through the woods. This is going to be a quiet section, not a lot of spectators back there in the woods. You come out of there, across the street, and then the 2K mark is right here. And the 1 mile mark is right there after you come out of the woods and right before you make that left turn and cross the street. So starting the 3K, we wrap around behind the church. This is going to be another quiet section. Not many spectators are going to get out to this part of the course. And then wrap around past the start. And then the 3K mark is basically where the 1K was. And now we're starting our second loop. And we've done 2 loop courses before. I encourage you to pay attention when you're coming through the first time. Try to notice some landmarks. Get you to the course a little better. Of course, you'll walk the course when you get there. But as you're racing through, think about prepping yourself for that second time through. So there's the 4K mark, and you can see there at the bottom, that second time you're going through the woods, you're going to hit the 2 mile mark going through there. And then the last 1,000, and 4K, that's a big landmark. We want to know where that is and be mindful of that because that's where you're setting yourself up to finish. And the last 1,000 goes right past the start and into the finish line. So now we're going to take a look at the elevation profile of this course. Here it is in gray is a sort of a side view. Again, don't worry too much about the way that looks because we need to think about scale. So we'll add some numbers in here. So here's the kilometer marks and the mile markers, and then here's some elevation. So from top to bottom, we're looking at about a 50-foot elevation change overall from the lowest point to the highest point of this course. And you can see some repetition in there because we do some of these loops twice. So now let's check this out kilometer by kilometer. So there's the start, and if you kind of watch the map and that elevation profile at the bottom, you can get an idea for the terrain we're going to go through. So this is a bit repetitive because of that loop. We're going to go down and then back up again, and then heading downhill to the first 1,000. And again, really pay attention to the scale. It looks like 2 hills there, but we're looking at a total elevation difference of about 20 feet. So nothing to be alarmed by too much. We're not climbing mountains here. The second 1,000, we drop down through the woods, and then we're climbing out of them past the mile mark to the 2K right here. There's our mile mark. And then into the third 1,000, there's a downhill as we go along the road, and then we climb back up as we head to that field where the start is. So that's definitely a piece to be mindful of because we're doing that hill twice. So there's our 3K. Back through the woods again. To the 4K point right there, and there's our 2-mile mark down there in the woods. And now we're going to start that last 1,000. As I've mentioned, when you get to the course, find that 4K point. Remember that it's a 2K point also, but at that 4,000, when you pass the edge of that parking lot the second time, you've got 1,000 meters left in the race, and that's when you really want to start being mindful of your position in the race and setting yourself up for a strong finish. As we go through that 4K, we're going down and up some hills, so down and then up and then down along the road. And right here out in the woods, we get to the bottom of a hill. We're climbing that hill and then pushing across the flat with a little bit of uphill there at the end as we go to the finish. So sometimes we talk about, we'll note the 400-meter mark and the 200-meter mark as a way to set yourself up for the finish. In this race, I think more than those distances, the places you want to be mindful of are the bottom of that hill out in the upper left-hand corner of the course. And then when you're going up that hill the second time, you are climbing your way to the finish. And it's going to be tough. That's not an easy hill. But you've got, at that point, actually that is probably about 400 meters, the bottom of that hill to the finish line. So even though there's a hill, that's where you really want to start pushing to the finish. And when you crest that hill for the second time, you'll be able to see the finish line. You got to push all the way in down that hill. It's going to be about 200 meters when you get to the top there. So think about accelerations, think about hill charges we've done in practice. You're ready for this, and you just have to be a little more ready than the person you're racing right next to. I hope you have a good race. I'm looking forward to seeing what the Pioneers do at the Parkway West Dale Shepard Invitational.